Good morning, friends. We are on Chapter 56, The Internet of Dope. Central Valley of California. "I might be down in Mexico next time you come through," the man said to me one morning as I sat again in his living room in California's Central Valley. He slouched in his easy chair, skull cap over gray hair, smiling hazily through the anemia, a once handsome face now pale and without the bronze gleam it once possessed. He stared out the screen door of the home his family bought for $22,000 years ago, and onto the street of cracked asphalt, prim lawns, and working-class stucco houses. We'd spoken for hours on my visits over many months since his release from the years in prison that he served for his part in Operation Tar Pit. He had a gripping story of how heroin dealers from one small Mexican town spread black tar to new markets across the United States. I spent hours in his presence, listening to his faint voice speak slowly of the past. Much of what he said I knew to be true or found ways of confirming. His knowledge of Jalisco was detailed, so too his knowledge of methadone clinics in cities of America. The rest sounded entirely plausible, but in the underworld as many people want to exaggerate what they've done as want to hide it. So I didn't know what to believe until I tracked down a DEA agent who'd worked Operation Tar Pit from the beginning. He confirmed the man's role, which he knew from listening to endless hours of wiretaps. He extended the organization's network into other cities, especially into cities where there wasn't any competition, the agent said. He would target methadone clinics where they'd find a client base and build upon it. Now, 15 years later, the crews the men had set up were still dealing misery. Countless young men from Jalisco Nayarit were doing long federal prison terms. Jalisco avoided the notice of Mexico's drug cartels for a long time. After all, what did cartel traffickers care about crews who sold a kilo of heroin at a time? In 2010, however, the Zetas and the Sinaloa cartel went to war in southern Sinaloa. The violence spread south and engulfed tiny Jalisco Nayarit. The results were predictable. Dead bodies appeared here and there. In one shootout, 11 people were killed, including Jose Luis Estrada, known as El Papino, the Cucumber, a reputed local drug boss. Jalisco officials spoke of canceling the Feria del Elote, and the State Department warned Americans against traveling to Tepic. Cell leaders, who'd already been moving to Guadalajara, moved there even faster. They kept a low profile and couldn't live in the houses they'd spent so much heroin money building. This went on for more than a year until it appears the Zetas triumphed. Cell leaders began paying protection to the cartel and things calmed down. The flow of Jalisco black tar into the cities of America never slowed, however. East of the Mississippi, Jalisco drivers tormented Nashville, Memphis, Indianapolis, several cities in South Carolina, Cincinnati, Charlotte, and of course Columbus, and the suburbs for miles around each city. In Florence, Kentucky, narcotics officers arrested a cell of Sanchez family operators, including one local woman who'd been a go-between for the family in Nashville during Operation Black Gold Rush in 2006. The cell had been using only local white drivers to deliver heroin, providing them with cars and cell phones, presumably because it could no longer find laborers back home to do the job. Apparently, a rumor spread around Jalisco that the Commonwealth states, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Massachusetts, had more lenient drug laws. Several Jalisco drivers had been arrested in Weymouth, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston. The boys remained decentralized, resilient, and adaptable. They embodied America's opiate epidemic. They were quiet, non-violent. They focused on new opiate markets where the only customers they wanted were the white people. They were, it seemed to me, the Internet of dope, a drug delivery system for the 21st century, working in as many as 25 states, and all of this coming out of one small town in Mexico. These drivers had their own addiction nipping at their heels. It was the ranchero's dream to return home a king, to pay the banda, to dance with the girls, to see other men's envy, and to feel the embrace of their families as they opened boxes containing precious Levi's 501s and designer jeans. Meanwhile, the local government noted in a report that Jalisco was the 111th wealthiest of Mexico's 2,445 counties, municipios. The Jalisco crews owed a good part of their success to the prescription pill addiction that was now in every corner of the United States. Whether any of them knew this is an interesting question. I knew drivers who'd never heard of the name Oxycontin. This made sense to me. They spoke no English and socialized only with their drivers. I also spoke, though, with Harry Summers, the DEA honcho who'd coordinated the tar pit investigations years before. Maybe the Jalisco peons knew nothing, Summers said, but, he told me, we know from information provided by members of these Nayarit networks and other intelligence that some of them were well aware of painkiller abuse and targeted areas where they believed it was rampant, and knowing those areas would be fertile ground for their product. Whatever the Jalisco boys knew, the way they flogged black tar heroin early on, combined with the aggressive marketing of pain pills in virgin territories, then forming into the Oxycontin belt to create catastrophic synergy, and presaged the transition from pills to heroin that would happen in the rest of the country years later. Kids who started on pills ended up alone and dead in their cars, slaves to a molecule. The forces set up to insist people consume it were as relentless as the molecule itself. Pills had been prescribed with wanton carelessness. Then black tar heroin from the Nayarit Mountains was sold to them like pizza. More and more parents continued on without their children. They suffered pain as chronic and life-mangling as any those doctors and Purdue Pharma decided should be treated with opiate pills. A lot was changing for the Jalisco boys. By 2014, heroin trafficking was expanding dramatically across America, with new dealers, many of them addicts, getting on in the action every day. None had the Jalisco boys' franchised heroin delivery system. Nevertheless, they gnawed at markets the boys had been cultivating for years, and they found new ones full of pill addicts ready to switch. The potency of brown powder heroin from other regions of Mexico and sold by black gangs out of Detroit and the East Coast was getting stronger. The Sinaloa cartel seemed to have massively upped its heroin exports to Chicago and New York City and elsewhere. Heroin seizures at the U.S.-Mexico border had risen sixfold since 2007. Back in Jalisco, meanwhile, an incipient avocado industry was overtaking sugarcane and coffee and providing work for many. The industry dates to about 2009, when growers from the state of Michoacan, Mexico's avocado center, brought money and partnered with local farmers to plant avocado orchards. By 2014, those orchards were bearing fruit. The coffee warehouse where David Tejeda was gunned down was now an avocado warehouse. Many of the young men who applied for jobs were those who had been arrested and served prison terms in the United States for selling heroin. Now with a criminal record, they faced lengthy prison terms if they were caught again up north. So they were turning to work in the avocado industry. Still, the town continued to live from tar heroin revenue in one way or another. Hundreds, perhaps even thousands of men from Jalisco County had gone north to sell heroin. Cars with U.S. license plates were common around town. Mostly they bore plates from California, Ohio, North Carolina, Utah, Colorado, and Oregon, and many of the vehicles had been used to hide and move large amounts of cash back home. Yet few men from Jalisco seemed substantially better off. Cell owners did well, but heroin cell workers remained tied to a cycle of boom or bust, spending money with ostentation, then having to return to the U.S. to work some more. In the Landerinas and Tres Puntos neighborhoods, the money's effect was hard to see, other than the men who hung out on the street corners drinking and using cocaine. Several streets there were still unpaved. Little of the drug trade lucre trickled back to the man anymore. I don't ask them for nothing, he told me. I hope they're making a lot of money. As long as they acknowledge me when I'm over there, I just want respect, that's all. I don't tell them you owe me, or if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't have this. They earned what they got. He had used the cartel piece in Jalisco to return for Christmas. He saw many of the older guys, some who were still going hard, others were barely getting by. The one-time black tar wholesaler, Oscar Hernandez Garcia Mosca, was back in Jalisco with his wife. He and his brothers were rumored to own the local rodeo arena at the entrance to town. The man had seen the Nayarit, his friend from the Nevada prison, and the partner in his first heroin cells. During the cartel conflicts, masked gunmen broke into the Nayarit's home while he and his family were out and took the television, jewelry, and a lot more. They brought a trailer to the robbery and made off with prized horses that he often rode in the parade through town. The man came back to California. Here in the Central Valley, he was frail and anonymous. None of his neighbors knew the story of the heroin cells of Jalisco Nayarit, so he spoke often of going home for good to Jalisco, his adopted town, the big rancho, where families knew all he had done for them. That looked unlikely. Life as a drug merchant, from the pills in Tijuana in the 1960s to the countless kilos of black tar, had left him slouched, gray, and weak with liver problems. As we talked that morning, his body seemed to slowly deflate into the chair. A wide television and a lamp on a stand stood nearby. His speech grew faint and slurred. His eyelids fell to half-mast. You never apologize for what you are. I don't. I did what I did, he said, grazing a palm down his face. I never intentionally set out to hurt anybody. Payback's a son of a bitch, but what the hell? You live with it. Have a good day, friends.